Welcome back to the MovieBabble Podcast. I'm Brennan, and Nick is on with me today. How's it going, Nick?
It's going good, Ben. How you doing?
You know what? It's not too bad. Just still watching movies, doing my thing. Did you have a good holiday last week? We had the week off. It was not only Independence Day, but also Canada Day as well. So we kind of had a good, nice week off there. How was it for you?
There you go. Happy Canada Day to you, sir. It was good. A lot of nothing. I've been just relaxing. It's nice to take a little break and forget about the world for a little bit. So it was really fun. I enjoyed myself.
Yeah, no, I mean it's the weather here. It's been great. Spending a lot of time outside, but still got to be weary. We're still watching out for COVID. It's on the decline here, so hopefully we get our theaters back soon at some point. But today we've got some interesting stuff to talk about, especially regarding a new Apple TV Plus film, Greyhound, which is one that at the beginning of the year I was quite excited for. So let's actually just get into that right away. So Greyhound is obviously the new war film. It's starring Tom Hanks, and it was also written by Tom Hanks, directed by Aaron Schneider, who hasn't done a movie in a little over 10 years. He also won an Academy Award for a short film back in the early 2000s for a film called Two Soldiers. But this movie, the reception has been mixed. I haven't gotten around to watching it. I have Apple TV Plus, and we'll get into that debacle a little bit soon. But this is a movie that was written by Tom Hanks, so I was kind of excited for it when I first heard about it. But the middling reviews sort of they don't turn me off from it, but they make me not as eager to sit down and give it a watch.
Yeah, this was a movie that I think it made the rounds in Hollywood circles for a while. It's like this kind of like this doomed movie. It was pushed back like a bunch of different times, even before everything with COVID happened. And I mean, it was originally with Sony, and they pushed it back to June of this year. Then they eventually just sold it to Apple when COVID really came up and running here in the States. So it is really interesting to kind of see this. This is a big time Tom Hanks movie. Budget is over $50 million, and Tom Hanks is beloved by just everyone around the world, and especially dads. And this has a serious dad energy kind of movie. But yeah, it's really interesting. It's the biggest movie out of a weekend that feels like kind of a normal weekend of movies. We had this one. We had Palm Springs, which we'll talk about later on. We had The Old Guard, which was a big time movie on Netflix too. It's really interesting kind of to see how all this is shaken out. And it's kind of weird how we had another weekend like this a while ago. It was like in the middle of June when The King of Staten Island came out. We had Artemis Fowl in there too. We had a bunch of different movies. It was kind of weird that it's like they bunch all these big time movies together in like one weekend and then leave us like nothing else to watch around it. But yeah, really, really interesting. And then the reviews aren't that bad. You say middling, but it's like certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, but it seems like if you look at like the average score of that, everyone's like, yeah, it's fine, like a 6 out of 10. So we'll see. But yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting that this Apple kind of went on a limb and got this movie. It's interesting to see what their prospects are moving forward as a streaming service.
Yeah, so you know what I got an Apple device a few months back, and they have a great promo. If you buy an Apple device, you get 12 months of Apple TV Plus. I don't know if it's for all Apple devices or just phones, iPads, and computers, but you do get 12 months free. So I'm on that right now, and I haven't really gotten around to watching much because the library isn't that expansive. There isn't too much there. There are a few shows and miniseries that are pretty popular. The Morning Show is one we touched on. Defending Jacob with Chris Evans is also another one that we touched on. And M. Night Shyamalan also had a TV series on Apple TV Plus. But this is like their first, I'd say, big movie that has been released on there. As you said, $50 million. It's a pretty big budget. Tom Hanks. And I will get around to watching it, but like with their library, I think this is the type of thing that you could potentially, you and me were talking about this, you could potentially just pay for Apple TV, watch this movie, and cancel it.
Yeah, I was wrapping my brain about this because I mean, just so many streaming services now. When you have Peacock coming out in the middle of this week on the 15th, and I was looking at all of my stuff that I subscribe to, and I have like HBO Max and Hulu and Disney Plus and Netflix and all this crap, and there's Peloton thrown in there too for non-film stuff. I'm one of those weird guys who has Peloton, but I just thinking about this, and we are getting this point, and we've speculated by this in the past about there's just too much streaming. There's too many streaming services. Not all these will last. Like all the money's going to dry out eventually. Like not even Netflix, for as popular as they are, they're not super profitable. So it'll be kind of weird to see what they do moving forward. But I always thought it was interesting because Apple TV Plus is pretty cheap. It's $5-6, and they don't have the library to really keep you there. So I was wondering, moving forward and starting with Greyhound, if it makes sense. I think, and a lot of people out there might feel similarly, but every time they do have something coming out, it seems like you should just like buy it for the whole month, and then it's basically just like you're renting the movie on Vudu, and then you can just cancel it right away after you watch it, and then you just wait for the next movie to come out. Because I know they are stepping up their production. There's been some reports of Apple's just kind of like jumping in. They saved Martin Scorsese's next project, Killer of the Flower Moon, which the budget was ballooning on that, and Paramount was getting cold feet, kind of like they were with The Irishman before that. So they stepped in to handle financing for the rest of it. But they really don't have that library because they don't have, like with Peacock, we'll have the Universal library or HBO Max's, the HBO and Warner Brothers and TCM and all that stuff. So it's interesting. I don't really feel like I don't want Apple TV, I don't think, but I think it does make a lot of sense for people who are trying to be, I guess, fiscally responsible in all this, just to rent and then just leave and maybe come back when something else that comes out is an interest to you. Because I don't really see what Apple's point in all this is yet. I think they still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I don't really know. I think the only probably people that have Apple TV are the ones that have that 12-month free trial right now, because I just don't think it's that attractive or lucrative for masses of people to come and get it. Sure, there are probably people here and there that get Apple TV Plus, but not at the numbers that you see for other streaming services. And yeah, another one that you did point to as just previously there was Killers of the Flower Moon, the Scorsese project, and that kind of felt like a charity, kind of like a charity purchase because it's still going to go to theaters apparently. Obviously, it's a while until that movie is actually going to come out, but it's still gonna. I think in the purchase they still negotiated this thing's going to go to theaters and not in the way that The Irishman did, in a much more wide and expansive way. So it's interesting, but I don't even think that would be enough to get masses of people getting Apple TV Plus.
Yeah, it's weird because Apple, like obviously tech giant, they have so much money, and they're not like your Hulu's or your Netflixes who are trying to gain money just off of their library. Like they have so much other things, and this is very much like an over the top service for them. Um, but yeah, I don't really know what their move is coming forward. I think a lot of it is just kind of like a nice to have for like people with their products, and it's like, oh, cool, I bought an iPhone and I can also watch Greyhound, which I guess is interesting for a certain group of people out there. Yeah, I don't really know what they're trying to do yet, and it seems like they're kind of one of those streaming services who's just trying to bid up every other like pitch that's out there in Hollywood. Like you kind of hear them, they're in the weeds, like trying to buy things, and they're kind of buying at a premium for a lot of the stuff that they do have. So I don't really know. I think they're trying to earn a lot of cachet with creators and show that they're willing to spend and bring all these big projects in. But yeah, I think Greyhound is just the start of that. I think they're gonna looks like they're starting to gear up at what they're doing with their service. So I haven't seen the movie yet either. So but we'll see. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, and even just one more thing with them, I feel like that Scorsese project, because if that still comes to theaters in a big way, like they do intend it to, I feel like that it's just Apple feeling like they want to potentially go for some awards or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time before like once Netflix uh, probably gets their Best Picture, they're gonna keep paying until it happens with their crazy campaigns and whatnot, and all the movies they roll out forwards. But after that happens, I feel like it's just kind of like the floodgates are gonna open. We're gonna see like a Hulu movie win somehow or whatever, and I don't even know. Then maybe Apple gets in there too. I think everyone's just waiting for Netflix to win theirs first.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll keep our eye on that for sure. So let's move into the Netflix top 10 as we have. We're gonna run from the top and then touch back on a few things as we discuss here. So the top 10, number one is The Old Guard, which is a new Netflix original starring Charlize Theron. This is an action film. Huge this week, apparently, big numbers. So we'll get back to that. The Lorax is number two. That's the animated one from 8 years ago or so. Only at number three. Another Netflix original at four, Desperados, which I saw. It's quite bad, and it's in the vein of The Small Missy. So that's kind of just your disclaimer. How Do You Know is at number five. Mucho Mucho Amor at number six. 365 Days at seven. It's still hanging in there, sadly, but it is still hanging in there. I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry, which we have talked about on this show before, not in the kindest of ways. At number eight, at number nine is The Town, and at number 10 is Despicable Me, and that movie will just never leave this list. So let's get back to the number one there with The Old Guard. So you saw it, right?
Yeah, this is a really interesting movie. I think it's more interesting kind of on the line of what we were talking about with Apple and just kind of the machinations of like the streaming side of all of this and streaming wars, I guess. But this is a big time movie. Like the budget was over 70 million for this. It was a co-production between Skydance and Netflix. And it's a big time Charlize Theron action movie. Yeah, so basically just this movie follows a small group of soldiers who basically have Wolverine powers. They've been living for centuries and fighting in the shadows and saving people all over the world and doing what they can. There's a really funny bit where two of the members of this group basically were they kept killing each other in their crusades, and they both eventually realized that they were immortal, and it's kind of funny. But yeah, so Charlize Theron is the leader of this, and she's been around for like thousands and thousands of years. And the kind of the fun little kicker on this is that you can die eventually. Like their power, their immortality runs out, but you never quite know when it's coming for you. So Charlize Theron's been around for forever, and she's seen soldiers join their ranks and like meet them and get close to them and die way before she has even thought about dying. So it's really interesting because you see like people, they do get killed a few times in the movie, and they're always really scared because this might be their last time, even though they are pretty immortal. So there's like some pretty good moments of fear and kind of undercut like the sheer power that they have. So really, really cool on that front. But yeah, this is a big time movie for Netflix. Kiki Lane is the star of this movie, who's some people might remember from If Beale Street Could Talk, and she's just tremendous in this movie as well. And I didn't really expect her to be in this kind of movie after If Beale Street Could Talk, but she's really good in it. I'm really looking forward to more with her, and it seems like this movie is set up for a sequel, and for how successful it is, it seems like that'll happen. But this is just a really big time move by Netflix. I feel like the action movies just haven't been good. I mean, I feel like Extraction is probably one of the better ones, and that movie just isn't very good still. So I feel like this is like a big time get for Netflix, and I think they're building their franchise and on a big scale. And I feel like this is like the first time we've seen this, where they've had their sequels and like their rom-coms, and like the To All the Boys I Loved Before and the Kissing Booths and all that, and the second one of that's coming out. But we haven't seen them build a franchise on this scale yet. So it's really interesting to see that people have really seem to like this movie. I thought it was fine, but it seems like a lot of people would really like it.
Would you say it's better than Extraction for sure?
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of Extraction. I think it's actually really interesting because one of the things I don't like about that movie is how deadly serious it is, even though how insane and like it's kind of borderline hilarious. Some of the stunts get it sometimes because they're just so choreographed and insane. But I think this movie, the stunts are incredible. Charlize is just probably one of the best action stars like ever at this point. Maybe she's probably in the Hall of Fame at the very least. But there's a really good sense of humor to this movie. They're like when people die, like they'll joke around a little bit about it, and this movie I think is pretty self-aware and understands what it is. It doesn't get too up its own butt like I think Extraction does. But yeah, it's a lot of like, you've seen this plot so many times before where it's like, oh, there's like an evil like billionaire who wants their powers. Like it's like that kind of thing. So you're like, okay, like we're gonna deal with this again. But there's just so many good actors in this movie. So you have Kiki Lane and Charlize Theron, like I mentioned before, and you have Matthias Schoenaerts in there as well, and Chiwetel Ejiofor is in there. Just it's pretty pat material, and it's elevated by just like some of our best actors. And like there's a lot of um, like heart to heart moments with a lot of the soldiers, and it just works so much better because these actors are so good. So I think it's pretty successful. It's like nothing great, like it won't make my top 10 of the year or anything like that. But as far as Netflix action movies go, like this is a pretty big win for them.
And was this always a, I don't know if you know, it might be unfair to ask, but this was this always a Netflix project, or is this something that they had to pick up or that a studio lent off to them due to COVID?
I'm pretty sure this was always a Netflix release. I think I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Skydance went into a deal with Netflix to start producing movies. So
Mm.
um, I think this is like, yeah, because we have seen this before where they've like picked up so many big budget movies, like you talk about The Irishman and so many others. And remember that movie Extinction with Michael Pena? Remember that movie? That
A
was
little
supposed to be
bit,
a
yeah.
Paramount. Yeah, that was supposed to be a Paramount movie, and then you have the Cloverfield Paradox, which I think is probably the most popular one that people always point to. So they always have picked up movies that other studios are kind of been like, I don't want to release this movie because it's bad. Like here, Netflix, you take it. But like, yeah, this is the first time where they've had a really big time budget, a lot of stars, and it's basically successful. I mean, you can look at other movies in different genres that have really worked for them, kind of like your Marriage Stories and all that. But this is like their real. I think this is one of their true first successes in the blockbuster realm.
Yeah, it's a good sign for them. I think, I mean, they're bound to, I mean, they make a lot of not great content, but I mean, I think they're bound to find something that works at some point. This could definitely be it. And obviously, Extraction was such a big hit too, so that's definitely probably gonna become a big franchise as well. So they might have competing action franchises here for Netflix in The Old Guard and Extraction. So that's pretty good sign for them. It's just another another win for them in this year that seems to be giving them a lot of wins. So we'll move out of the top 10 now, and we'll move into discussions of some other movies that came out this weekend. As you said, this kind of felt like a regular weekend. Obviously, The Old Guard, Greyhound, and then Palm Springs, which you have a little bit to talk about. But let me just kind of theorize real quick, or just kind of fantasize. Say this was a regular weekend at the box office, and let's just say The Old Guard wasn't a Netflix movie. Who do you think would have taken top spot?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell. I feel like the Old Guard probably would have been the number one. I think that's just the most widespread, um, just the most widespread interest for a lot of people because it's kind of has that superhero bend to it. Greyhound definitely would have like captured like the over 50 crowd. I think that's just such a it's World War II movie. It's Tom Hanks. Like there's just all it pushes so many buttons for the older crowd. And I think it weirdly like it would have been pretty good counter programming to the Old Guard because I feel like in the summer months we always see like there in like July right around now there's always like a couple weekends where it's like pretty crowded, but all the movies kind of make sense why they're releasing in the same week because like one's a comedy and one's a horror movie and one's something totally different that serves a different audience. So I think both of them would have done pretty well. Um, I think Palm Springs probably would have been in less theaters. I would have guessed. I mean, we'll get into the movie itself, and there's definitely a lot of it's a pretty mainstream movie. It's a Groundhog Day riff, if you will. So it probably would have been successful with wider audiences, but I feel like that movie probably would have opened in like 1,000 screens, something like that, and move forward. And I feel like that's kind of what this movie was originally going to be distributed by Neon, and so that's typically what they do with kind of their more popular movies that they release. They kind of do like the A24 route,
Hmm.
and as well. But yeah, I think Old Guard. I think we'd probably look at as the number one of the week.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a mute point at the end of the day, but I like to look at the movies that have been coming out and just kind of try to picture in my head where these would have been on Box Office Mojo. But so let's jump into Palm Springs. So obviously it was a Sundance, came out at Sundance, and you saw it. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I was Colin and I were both really upset when we left Sundance because this was probably the one big time movie we didn't get a chance to see, and everyone was raving about it, and it was actually the biggest purchase ever at Sundance. So the final total was like 17 million and 69 cents, which is pretty funny. They beat the one right below that by 69 cents. So just a fun little thing by Lonely Island, just trolling everybody. But yeah, so this comes from the minds of all the guys at Lonely Island. So Andy Samberg is the star, and the other members of Lonely Island are producing this movie. and it's a Groundhog's Day riff, but it's one of those movies where like so we know this premise so many times, like Happy Death Day has been here, and we've had so many like reliving the same day kind of riff movies, but like rarely have we seen it where two people are dragged into this like time world, like spinning circle, whatever it is. Like we never seen two people get dragged in at the same time, which is kind of funny. It makes so much sense when you think about it, but we don't really get that. We haven't seen that iteration of this kind of movie. So it's really fun in that sense, and it's a really smart screenplay. Like all the things you would think of that are kind of like the third act of a lot of these movies. Like they try like, all right, let's try being selfless, and that happens in like the first like 15 minutes. They try to be really nice and it doesn't work. So like, yeah, screw that. It's time to be awful again. And they try all these things of like, all right, let's try killing ourselves in all these different ways. Let's try driving away. Like they try everything you would think of for like a third act of like a time loop movie, and it's over in like the first 30 minutes. So you're like, okay, perfect. So we're going in new territory from here. And the movie is just really funny. It's really nihilistic because Andy Samberg has been stuck in the time loop for God knows how long before the movie even starts. So he's just already like, I hate life and everything's meaningless. And it's really funny. Nice little bend to these kind of movies. Um, but yeah, I feel like it's one of the buzzier, maybe not. It's like film Twitter releases of the year because we haven't had our A24s and neon movies like we normally would have. So I think this is like one of the first time where it's just a smaller movie that people are really latching onto, and I can see why. It's really funny. I think people are going nuts for this movie, and I can totally see why. But I think I love the first half of this movie a lot more than I do the second half. I think the second half, for as creative as the movie is, I think it's when it kind of goes back on those rom-com tropes and it becomes more of a straightforward rom-com, and it becomes a little less funny in my mind. But it's there's so many funny moments in this movie that I don't really want to spoil for people, because it does find a lot of funny ways to play with the time loop that we haven't seen before. So even if it doesn't quite break the mold, and I feel like you really can at this point with these kind of movies, it's wildly inventive. It's really well edited, I thought too. Andy Samberg is hilarious. I really love this movie. I think this is a huge get for Hulu, and I think I'm sure this is going to end up being one of the probably a lot of people's favorite movie of the year, if not like in their top 10 or something like that.
Yeah, that's neat. I mean, yeah, I mean, he has that instant charm. I'm excited to see this at some point. Obviously, I think we've talked about it, but Hulu isn't here in Canada, so I got to find some other methods. Usually, they follow a few months after on VOD or something like that. So I'm looking forward to seeing it now. But it is a pretty busy weekend for movies. And is this the type of movie that you think could make any splashes, say, with some comedy guilds, or do you think it's more of just kind of an enjoy it in the moment and it's going to have its crowd, but not really something like that?
Yeah, I don't really know because I feel like all awards like bodies are just really weird with comedies. Like I don't know if we've like figured out like how to like put them up against like the deathly serious dramas that are normally like your Oscar contenders and Golden Globes and like all your critics guilds and whatnot. So I don't really know there, but I do think it's really interesting because I feel like the rap on Andy Samberg movies has been like they're always like pretty funny, but they always do terribly in theaters, and like this like because of just everything going on, like it kind of robbed us of seeing like, hey, like could he break that mold? But I don't know. I feel like this was like the perfect opportunity for Andy Samberg to show like just like how talented he is, and it's just like we don't have to worry about box office or anything like that. And who
Hmm.
knows? Maybe like his next movie is just more successful because people have checked out this movie. I certainly hope so because I think the Lonely Island crew is just hilarious and everything they do is really funny. So who knows?
Yeah, the one of the better things that they've done is definitely Pop Star. I love that movie. It's so funny.
So good. And I think Hot Rod is pretty funny too in Streaks. Like it's one of the dumbest movies, like probably like I don't know, just it's really stupid, but they are oh my god, there's some really funny bits in that with Andy Samberg like trying to fight Winston Duke who plays his dad, and he's like they're doing like the thing of like he's not a real man until he can beat up his dad, and they have like crazy like ninja fist fights. It's really funny, but I think everything they do is just in one way or another. Like they worked heavily on MacGruber, which is a movie I love too.
Hmm.
I really hope that this like leads to more things for them because it's a pretty cheap movie. It was 5 million. So just like the fact that I was purchased for that 17 million amount is just really good for them. So I hope for the best, and I hope they do something because they've been really popular on SNL for so many years. But I hope they can branch out of that and make some really interesting movies.
Definitely. And just kind of segueing out of that, let's touch on, before we go today, some of what we've been watching besides newer stuff. Actually, what I'm going to touch on is, I guess, somewhat newer, but mostly it's just about going into a drive-in. So obviously, drive-ins are making somewhat of a comeback. In the time of COVID, I know that there were a bunch that had recently closed that are now reopening for this summer and stuff like that. I mean, it's good business for them, and I mean, it makes sense, right? You can't. A lot of theaters are closed. You can't go to the theaters. The drive-in is the next best thing if you want to go out and see a movie. So I've never been to a drive-in before, but I went to one. It was about 45 minutes away from where I live, and I live in a relatively suburban area, and it was pretty much in a very rural area, a lot of farmland. Nice scenery for sure, but when I was there, it was a good experience. They had their concession stands open. They were closed when they first opened up due to COVID, but they've now opened. But it was neat because you just kind of switched to a radio channel. I didn't know if it was going to be speaker or radio in the car, and it was just radio. You switch to a certain channel, and the movie plays through it. It was definitely a good time, and I definitely recommend it. So the two movies I saw that night are both 2020 films. One, we touched on it, I believe, a couple of weeks ago. It was Jon Stewart's Irresistible. I got to see that, starring Steve Carell, and then The Hunt. You know what? Both these movies were interestingly very. Not as much with The Hunt. I mean, it was kind of spoofy, but they were very politically motivated, which is kind of interesting. It was a neat double feature in that respect. I found both movies to be all right. I don't know if you got around to seeing either of them yet. Irresistible is okay until it really beats you over the head with what it's trying to say. But I did enjoy it for the most part. I think it's kind of like a weird, kind of like a cute little kind of political film and a decent comedy, but it does at times get a little bit in your face with some of the things that it's trying to do. And I do like Jon Stewart a lot. And then The Hunt, you know what? This is the meme of a movie, and it finally got to come out. And I mean, it wasn't great, but I didn't mind it. You know, it was all right. Maybe it was just the experience of being out and seeing it, but it was all right. It was entertaining.
And it's really funny because I haven't seen either of these movies just because I didn't want to pay $20 for them when they were on like premium VOD or whatever, and I don't have a drive-in near me. So I'm looking for it. I think The Hunt is actually available now just for regular like VOD or whatever, like your $5-6. But yeah, I didn't really. I can't say I was particularly interested in like paying like premium for either of these movies. So well, like would you like recommend either of those two? I know you're not too crazy about them, but like, do you like either of them anyway?
You know what? I think it depends the type of person that you are. I mean, the drive-in is great because it's pretty much the price of one regular theater admission to see two. That's pretty much how drive-ins work. So they bumped up the prices slightly for COVID just to kind of make some money back from what they lost from opening late. So they're usually, I think, $12 a ticket. It was $15 to watch both movies, and that's fine. But on VOD, you know what? I think it depends what type of person you are. If you are very into the, I guess, political scene, I think Irresistible would be a worthy movie to check out. Despite I don't think it really hits the mark perfectly. I think it would be kind of worthy to check out if that's your niche. And The Hunt, I mean, if I think that's a movie that, say, a family just wants to watch a movie and kind of want to enjoy some gore. I don't know. Like I'm not going crazy for these movies, but you know what? They're if you're into that, then I'd recommend it.
All right, so I'm gonna wait until they're for like you can pay for like $1 for them because I don't
Yeah,
care.
yeah. And just I guess flip it back to you now. What's something you've checked out this past week or so?
Yeah, so the movie that I wanted to talk about is actually another new movie, and it came out on Shudder this weekend, and it's called The Beach House. So this is a really, really cool horror movie from first-time director Jeffrey A. Brown. And after watching this, I kind of feel like he is a director to watch moving forward because this is a pretty small budget for this movie. I don't know what the numbers are, but it's there's like four people in the cast. It's all takes place at the titular beach house, um, and he does such a good job of like reining in the kind of atmosphere that he wants for this kind of story, because it's nothing really happens for probably like the first like 30-ish minutes. It's a lot of people talking. So kind of like the synopsis of this story is that a young couple goes to a beach house. The the guy's dad owns it. He figures no one's going to be there, so they're just going to go. They're going to try to rekindle their relationship a little bit, and they realize that it's double booked. So like there was a older family staying there, a husband and a wife. So they both run into each other in the house, and they're like, "All right, well, we're both here. Like, why don't we just like hang out?" And they're like, "Ah, sure, why not?" And so they're hanging out, and they take some edibles together, and like slowly things start to go wrong. And then like this movie plays really well with kind of like that Lovecraftian horror, which is like the unimaginable horror of like what's happening. And it seems like there's something wrong with the water supply. You never really know what's the you never really know what's the cause of it. Like it could be like spores, is it aliens, like what's really going on here. But there's some really good uh, gore effects, all practical, and it's really creepy. In this movie, there's some really great foreshadowing in this movie. It's really really terrific, and I think it starts to struggle against its budget a little bit as you get to the third act, and it gets maybe the ending might be a little frustrating for people, but yeah, I think the less they're known about this movie, the better. It's really really cool and really creepy. Some really good effects, and I really like this movie. I think Jeffrey Brown is a director to watch out for here.
And sorry, where did you watch it?
It's on Shutter, so I think it came
Oh,
on
Shutter.
Shutter like
Yes, yes, yes.
on the 9th or something like that.
Okay,
But
yeah, that's the horror streaming service, correct?
yeah, and so they have a really good. I think they have a really good picker. Like they showed a few movies. There's a few Shutter movies at Sundance that I watched. The Weeping Woman was one, or I think it switches between the title of La Llorona, which is eerily similar to the one from Warner Brothers. It was terrible that came out last year, but it goes between that and The Weeping Woman. Um, and that movie is terrific too, and I think that'll drop on Shutter later this year. But they pick a lot of really interesting movies for their service. Like I think Mandy, the big Nick Cage instant cult classic, is on Shutter as well. They do a really good job of kind of highlighting movies that probably wouldn't have been picked up for theatrical distribution. They might have been just dropped on VOD otherwise. So I like what they do, and I think this is a really good addition to their library.
Yeah, no, that's good, and I mean they are pretty popular too. The Shutter, I think that they have a really solid audience in terms of just garnering those horror fans.
Yeah, it's if you like horror, like that's Shudder's for you, and I think they do a really good job of. I think they're similarly priced to Apple, like it's like a couple $5-6 something like that. But if you love horror, it's like you really just can't do anything better than that.
Yeah, definitely. And just to kind of wrap things up, I do want to say I will check out Greyhound, and I'll give some feedback on that for next week's podcast. We'll see if Colin does return as well. He's still on vacation mode. um, but that is all, and you can check out our content obviously on our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and you can see more of all this on MovieBabble.com.